UEFA, they've announced their plans to sell a stake in the World Cup. So let's kind of break it down for you. So it would involve creating a new entity called FIFA Forward Enterprises, otherwise known as FFE. Now, FFE will run all commercial and event operations, so including broadcast and sponsorship rights, ticketing, licensing and merchandise. Now, the plans are to sell up to 21% of FFE to private investors, and they would intend of bringing in 4.2 billion in revenue. Now, that revenue and money will be released to member associations, so the countries that are a part of FIFA, through FFFP, so that's FIFA Fast Forward Programme. Now, FIFA have set a September 19th deadline for those members to approve the plan, and they're waiting for approval of the majority of the 211 countries that are a part of FIFA and the 37-member FIFA Council. Now, yesterday, UEFA announced that they would boycott all FIFA events if these plans were to go ahead. And the first event that would be impacted would be the Under-20s Women's World Cup in September. Now, other governing bodies around the world have released statements against FIFA's plans. And CONCACAF released this statement in part saying, "History has shown FIFA and the football family what happens when the custodians of the game lose sight of these values. For these reasons, CONCACAF and its 41 member associations have rejected the proposal." AFC also released a statement that said in part, quote, "In light of the clear positions expressed by UEFA and CONCACAF, as well as the unprecedented divisions that have emerged across the football world, the AFC believes that the proposed FFE cannot realistically achieve the necessary broad consensus and unity required to move forward." So this is where kind of all the federations in the world stand on this proposal. UEFA, AFC, CONCACAF have opposed the plans. Now, even though Mexico are a part of CONCACAF, they released a statement yesterday in part saying, "We're going to evaluate and do what is best for Mexican football." So with UEFA, AFC and CONCACAF opposed to the plans, it would mean if all nations agree with their governing body, over 50% of the 211 nations would vote against it on September 19th. Now, CAF, OFC, Conmebol haven't come out and said anything. So, Nico, now we've seen AFC and CONCACAF following the direction of UEFA. Were you expecting this level of resistance against this plan so quickly?
I actually applaud them because, no, I don't know if I expected this type of reaction so quickly, you know. Infantino at first said 53 days to decide for all member associations, and that kind of put a lot of pressure on everybody to make this monumental decision in a matter of less than 2 months, right? This is a huge business proposal. And I feel like UEFA, which was the first domino to fall, smelled something in the air, that this was a moment to make a power play. And they did. And credit to them, because it takes a lot of backbone to just first not only reject, but then threaten to boycott if it even goes through when, you know, you have 55 votes. You're not enough to reject the whole proposal as it is. And then CONCACAF followed, and then AFC followed. We kind of got inklings that AFC was going to be the third domino to fall. So I applaud a lot of these confederations that have, for the most part, unanimously rejected this proposal that really, to them, came out of thin air from one moment to the next. They found out via the reporting that was leaked by Martin Ziegler and then everybody else at The Athletic and the Times and AP. You know, a lot of this journalism is what made a lot of the governing bodies in football aware of what was going on behind the scenes, kind of almost undermining their standing in the leadership of the football world.
And it made sure that Infantino couldn't do this on his own timeline. It couldn't do it with other backroom deals or have it out in a plan. They had to rush out a press release. They had to rush out seemingly video after video trying to clarify the last video and everything else. One of the things that Infantino in another FIFA-produced video said, you know, football's not for sale. The soul of it's not for sale. That's just empty words, right? Your actions versus your words. If I could,
he's trying to contradict. He's trying to contradict what UEFA was saying, right?
Yeah.
He wants to be like, kind of save face in front of like a lot of the damning statements that UEFA put out there.
Right, and to tell us to not believe our eyes, which is, you know, part of the playbook for things like this. But to go for one quick moment of levity, if I may, looking at all these statements, and I applaud UEFA, CONCACAF, AFC. First of all, UEFA, because it was bravest by going first and saying the boycott. I don't believe CONCACAF and AFC have committed to the boycott. But in a moment of levity, CONCACAF, the federation of Jack Warner, of Chuck Blazer, of Sepp Blatter's plaything, essentially, for the last FIFA scandal of the 2010s.
Hawit also.
They are the ones that are saying, you know, the soul of football and the governing body when they lose sight of the fact, right? Like, we were unironically joking about we missed the corruption of the Sepp Blatter era versus this, right? And it's just insane to where we get back to. Chris Wittyngham did a podcast recently going over all of this, and he kind of joked, like, when Infantino took over, he was so widely popular because he wasn't Sepp Blatter. And for all of his initial interviews to come around all the way to this, it's just disheartening.
And I guess to the overall point they were talking about, which is this bravery, this newfound bravery that everyone has. It is a little bit ridiculous considering everything that has happened in the build-up to the last World Cup, that happened at this World Cup in terms of the ticket prices and the issues that they had politically with other countries, you know, being able to even enter the United States to begin with.
Are you implying almost like where was the bravery?
Right, exactly. And it is fascinating, and it just goes to show how deeply unpopular this is. And what you mentioned, which is UEFA having this incredible power by saying, if we're not at the World Cup, that's 6 of your 8 quarterfinalists at this most recent tournament gone. Yeah. And so many of the champions and so much of the dominance in this sport comes from Europe. But I am still surprised at the reaction that is coming from these federations in Asia and in CONCACAF, and we'll see what the other ones come out with, because they are filled with more countries that theoretically have less at stake, right? If you're UEFA, you have so many countries in your confederation that are trying to win the World Cup, that are trying to take next steps in football. There are more countries in the Asian Confederation and in CONCACAF who frankly have no chance of qualifying for the World Cup, that don't have as much at stake other than, let's say, this money.
So, I don't know. I think there's take out your, I'll count them on one hand. Yeah. Spain, Belgium, Portugal, France, Germany, Italy.
Those are the World Cup winners, but...
Right, hold up. And then who else? Throw in another team, Netherlands. Yeah. I might have missed one.
Well, I mean, Switzerland made the last 16.
Okay,
right. You know,
Luxembourg, Andorra, Lithuania.
Of course.
I think there's a lot of those countries in UEFA too that also deserve a little bit of recognition because they're
but the strength of the power though of those confederations comes from the major footballing nations, right? Their interests are the ones being reflected in UEFA. In CONCACAF, I'm actually a little bit surprised that U.S. Soccer came out and came out in support of this statement from CONCACAF.
It was one line.
Yeah, it was one line.
Enough.
But it still was support, considering that there is a significant American influence behind this plan. And so I am surprised that these confederations and a lot of these nations with theoretically less at stake have come out and said, we don't support this. We don't support taking cash on hand. And I think there is a little bit of a business view. And we can talk about the soul of the game and you know, ethics and morals and all this stuff. Realistically, these confederations and these nations are making business decisions. They're thinking about cash now or owning the World Cup later. And even if you think that there is more value to be extracted from the World Cup, even though they just extracted $15 billion worth in one cycle, even if you think that there is more money to be made, we're the ones that can do that. We should own this thing because this is the most valuable sports property in the world. And if there's more value to be attained from it, we can do that. We don't need to sell off 21% of it to a private equity firm so we can extract this value.
We'll get into this in the later segment because we'll talk about the resignation of Carlos Cordeiro, who was the chief advisor to Infantino. But he lays it out in his statement where it says that FIFA has enough cash reserves, right? FIFA's an NGO. Why does an NGO need billions of dollars in cash reserves, right? Like, why isn't that money just going back into the game, right?
And I want to give credit to a European journalist named Lars Sivertsen. He's Norwegian. And he said, one of the things that FIFA is not paying enough attention to in their push for money, one is the governance thing, which is they're in theory supposed to be in charge of the game. And so you're making financial-based decisions while also governance decisions. That's a conflict, but that's been talked about. One thing that I hadn't considered that he mentioned is that there's a pretty significant battle between major clubs and FIFA and international teams because there is this feeling that clubs are not compensated enough when they pay the lion's share of players' salaries. And that players will feel, well, now if this is this money-making venture and you guys are going to start extracting all the value from the World Cup and this is about money, the players don't really make that much money from playing in international competitions, certainly in comparison to what they make for their club teams. And so are the players going to say, all right, you have a new venture to start extracting all the money from the World Cup. We own 50%. Have they considered that? Have they considered, and Lars, who on this podcast I was listening to, was saying, roughly right now, relative to the money that they make, players make about 5, 6, 7% of the money that's available out there from World Cup payments. You don't think they're going to want more if all of a sudden we're selling to private equity and there's billions of dollars more in the game than there was before?
That's the institution of FIFA taking advantage of the players. Because FIFPro isn't as strong as it should be, and there's no other players association that is so united for the best interest of the people who we pay money to see.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like this is a little bit of the conversation that we had at the beginning of the week, that during, at least for the European players, you're playing in so many tournaments. You're being wrung out for your last drop of sweat throughout an entire year to then perform at an expanded World Cup through qualifying. Now qualifying windows are chunked together. You're playing more qualifying games. It feels like every entity that governs FIFA wants that ROI, wants that more. And the ones who are suffering are the players. And it felt like, now that you mentioned this, Chris, it feels like they, you know what, they said, let's just throw in this money. We don't even have to pay the players anything. You know, like they're just completely overlooking who makes you all that money.
Well, right. Not only are you overlooking it, but you're also taking advantage and preying upon the fact that players do it for the pride of playing for the nation. And that the current setup, for as much money
doesn't
as they
empower
make,
them.
Right, but the current setup, players still ignore the fact that they don't really make that much money because I want to go win the World Cup for my country. But the second you start to make it a business proposition, the players are absolutely going to say, where's my cut? And they more than deserve it. They more than deserve their cut of whatever $15 billion they made over the last 4 years.
Yeah. CAF, OFC and Conmebol haven't come out with any statements. Tom, do you think we should expect to hear from those federations in the upcoming days?
At some point they have to, right?
Yeah.
There's
What
going
do you
to
think
be.
they'll say?
Why?
Because the pressure of the questions.
53 days.
Sure. It
And
becomes.
it's already shot down. Like eventually, you add all the numbers of CONCACAF, UEFA, and AFC, and you have a super majority rejecting it. So why does CONMEBOL, who's like mega tight with FIFA, and CAF, who's mega tight with FIFA, who backs Infantino, I don't think they have a spine enough.
The only reason why, for them to say something would be the direction of travel seems to be that there will be a future beyond Gianni Infantino at the start of this next election. And at some point, you have to get on board with the future.
Well, I don't think that makes it difficult at all, because you're going to talk about loyalty and everything. All of these things, as Woody said, they're business propositions. This is political capital. Well, if Gianni Infantino is about to flame out, if he's about to sink, what does your loyalty go? You go down with him. Like, at some point, if it ends up, if it's CONMEBOL that are the last federation that has not made a statement, that becomes conspicuous. And then you don't just get to sit there quiet. In 2026, people are saying, why aren't you saying anything? You not saying anything is you backing him. And, are you actually in favor of this? Something that is now overwhelmingly unpopular. And then that becomes stamped to you, because so it will serve them. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. It's got to be soon. They have to.
So this is clearly a global vote of no confidence for Infantino. But Alejandro Dominguez, the president of CONMEBOL, and Patrice Motsepe, the president of CAF, have been so tight with Infantino that I think they're being very meticulous in how they eventually go public with their opinion on all of this, because it does become difficult. Because if Infantino does go down, then are we going to go down, is what they must be asking themselves and their inner circle. But what if Infantino doesn't go down? Because that's still a real possibility, and you turn your back against him? Good luck with your future as a politician in your confederation.
Listen, it's not that I'm not even that conniving. I'm not smart enough in the political sphere to do this, but it's very clear to me. You say, yeah, we did back him, but oh my God, he did this behind our back. We would never have accepted this. If he brought it to us, we would have shot it down. We would have fought for you. This was a step too far. Yeah, now I look back at all the other stuff. Hey, I'm a victim here too, because I didn't see it coming. I think it's that simple of a pivot.
Yeah. I think Infantino, he was so tight. He is so tight with Dominguez and Motsepe. They might have, I'm assuming, but I think it would be disingenuous to believe that they had no idea.
Of course, but that's what you say.
Yeah.
But You're stabbing Infantino in the back there.
What do they care?
Because what did he say as president?
Well,
if you publicly stabbed him in the back, that's how difficult this is. That's why it's so meticulous for these guys that have been so tightly wound with Infantino for this entire process.
There's some suggestion and some reporting already this morning from Gary L. Smith, who's a very well plugged in African journalist, that basically the confederations are going to release the teams to make, or the nations to make whatever decision that they want. There won't be an official CAF thing.
CAF wants to clean their hands,
right.
exactly.
Everyone go make the decision that's best for them.
Today, more news regarding this proposal has come out. The senior FIFA advisor and former US soccer president Carlos Cordeiro resigned today in protest at FIFA's private equity plan. So he advises Gianni Infantino and represents FIFA on the White House task force. This was his statement that in part said, as a senior advisor to the FIFA president, a former banker and a lifelong football fan, I cannot stand by while FIFA considers selling a stake in the World Cup. Let me be clear, I had no involvement in this proposal and I oppose it unequivocally. It is a bad deal for FIFA's members associations, a bad deal for football and a bad deal for the long-term future of the game. Chris, you've got a trusted member of Gianni Infantino's inner circle here. He's saying, I've had no involvement in this. I highly oppose this plan. Does that reduce the confidence in what FIFA are putting out now?
100%. I think the most valuable part of his bona fides that he mentions there is as a banker. That's the most important qualification that he says there. And he says throughout the statement, after more than 35 years in banking, I understand both the value of this asset and the consequences of giving part of it away. They're fine on cash. They have no debt. They just need to, if they feel that they can, continue to increase the value of this asset, which, by the way, will happen. We know that the TV rights deal here in the U.S. is up, and there are reports suggesting that that number can go up 2 or 3 times as much as what was paid for the 2026 World Cup. We know that the World Cup will continue to grow in value. So I think what he says here, 2 things that are fascinating. One is, as a banker, and goes on to enumerate all the reasons why it's bad.
Well-experienced banker.
Right, exactly. But number 2, the fact that he's involved at the senior, you mentioned, senior advisor to Gianni Infantino, had no idea wasn't involved in this. How small is the group of people that put this together and considered so few of the ramifications of this getting out to the public? And we're basically just trying to get something done quickly under the veil of secrecy, and then all of a sudden this thing is now just a part of our lives.
That's the worrying part out of all of this. That, to me, like I hear that from Carlos Cordeiro, and immediately I feel all the red flags everywhere.
Yeah.
Because not only that, he was in charge of putting together the White House task force for the World Cup. That's a direct link to the White House when the proposal itself has a direct link to Trump, right? And he was completely blindsided, the chief advisor to Gianni Infantino. It shows that this proposal, this project, the plan, whatever you want to call it, was put together in a very rash manner, not deeply thought out, and put together to a point so quickly that puts pressure on so many member associations to respond, frankly, in too little of a time to really evaluate the benefits or all of the negatives, the cons that it could bring, and obviously not in a democratic setting where everybody's present. It's like here, it just gives the energy of, hey, here's $20 billion, check this out, vote yes or no, you know?
Yeah.
That's not how things should be done by the governing bodies of football. That, again, I have to insist, because a lot of people might not understand this, that look at this from an outside perspective. FIFA's not the NBA. FIFA's not the NFL. FIFA is a non-profit organization. They shepherd the game. They don't own it. I applaud Carlos Cordeiro, because it takes a lot of guts to come out so clean and so clear with what is at stake.
Speaking of the NBA, I think Gianni Infantino thought he was Steph Curry when he pulled up from 35 feet here. It's actually Nick Young. And I think he just misjudged the entire situation. And he thought, well, I got the hydration breaks, I got everything that's happened in America, the ticket prices, I'm Teflon. And he got to the point where, like, yeah, I'll just push this through. Yeah, nobody.
Right.
And he turned around when the shot was in the air, and it hit the backboard, and now he's walking off the court.
It's just, it's something so seismic for the fabric of football. And he just kind of, like, so informally
But
try to push it through with behind the scenes backroom dealing.
But Nico, to Tom's point, he did it already and it worked. Think of all the things, and if anything, and someone pointed this out on Twitter, it's hardly a novel idea, but all of the things that happened in this World Cup, we have commercial breaks now in each half, which a lot of countries around the world took advantage of. We have ticket prices that are now dynamically priced to make sure that there isn't a dollar left on the table, to make sure that, if someone is willing to pay and take out second mortgages to go to the World Cup final for $30,000 a ticket, they will do that. And so all of these things were trialed basically as a demonstration of, if we did this into the future, private equity, that there is so much more money to be made than has already been made. All we need is for you to help us execute on this vision. And so all of these things are put together and they sound great and they worked for Gianni. And Gianni seemed like he had an iron grip. The number of things that went wrong for him politically, as it relates to the issues with Iran and other things.
Yeah, the referee.
And even with the Balogun situation, like how badly that was handled. A lot of federations are still mad, but no one's come out like this to say anything.
No.
Yeah.
Send statements out, multiple confederations, presidents, member associations. No one came out, or very few, came out in the aftermath of the Balogun thing. It seemed like Gianni had an iron grip on all of this, and he went all in for the kill shot. The kill shot that, by the way, was going to allow him to be in charge of FIFA well beyond his term-limited presidency.
If you make up rules as you go, you get elected one more time, but then you create a separate entity.
Right, and then you're the commissioner of that, and you take a salary that's 10 times as much reportedly as what you're currently making. It was him setting himself up for the future. And so it is incredible how small the circle is that even someone as influential as Carlos Cordeiro is within FIFA has no idea.
You mentioned that iron grip a couple of weeks ago. Despite everything you mentioned, he looked untouchable. And now he overplayed his hand?
For sure.
Significantly.
For sure.
We don't know the future of Infantino. This could be the beginning of the end. I mean, Cordeiro resigning is a massive step in the direction of the beginning of the end.
Wouldn't be surprised if he runs.
Honestly.
I mean, and obviously we've seen the reports of El Khelaifi, we've seen the reports of Montagliani. It feels like Infantino's power in the leadership of the football world hasn't been weaker. But you did get the sense, Chris, mentioning everything that you mentioned about the water breaks, about Iran's treatment, about the Somalian referee not being let in, about the exorbitant prices, about the halftime show, that football, the integrity of football was being messed with. And if someone played it right, they could have toppled Infantino. And it's almost like he invited this whole mess onto himself because he bit off more than he could chew.
Yeah. It was all fine until this. This was the last thing that finally, and then people start to, you might take away my future earnings, my future money. And that was finally the thing that got people to react and to try and instigate change.
Yeah.
Two weeks ago, he would have been able to run unopposed with all of the backing up.
For sure.
On Monday. On Monday, he could have ran unopposed.
And he would have gotten every vote.
Like, if he does the Florentino Perez thing, which I think is, what Florentino Perez did was pretty ballsy as president of Real Madrid. It's like, okay, someone run against me right now.
Yeah.
If Infantino did that right now, I don't think he would come out on the winning side like Florentino Perez did.
Yeah, because like Witty said, there were so many things happening like during the World Cup and after the World Cup. And ever since this plan's come out, you've had 3 confederations go against you. You've now, in a sense, had your right-hand man as an advisor go against you as well. Where do you think the future lies for Gianni Infantino? Could you see him getting re-elected in March?
It's certainly much less of a proposition than it was, like you said, Nico, on Monday. And you're right, it's like whack-a-mole with these things. It's like goes from the Balogun red card controversy. More details come out about that. There's a report that it was actually one person who voted on it. That was the whole committee. Yeah. And then before you know it, it's the 64-team World Cup, and it's the private equity plan. It's just at every point, you're just swinging at other things. We could have had a full segment on the fallout from the Balogun situation today, but there's just no time when you flood the zone with everything.
And also, another little moment. Oh, I mean, this is Gianni Infantino's resume. Continue. I'll get afterwards.
It does not look good. He is absolutely vulnerable right now to the point where we're talking about Carlos Cordeiro. Could he run? Victor Montagliani, can he run? Anybody else within the wider soccer world, if you have any ambition, desires for this job, which is probably where it'll end up, rather than somebody who wants to help save the game, it's more likely to be the former than the latter. But if you're somebody who's ambitious and you thought about this job, you strike right now.
And that's so shocking because, like we talked about, all these member nations, all these associations were in line. They're in line behind Gianni Infantino. No problems at all. And it felt like he had such a powerful grip that anyone who steps even a little bit out of line is at risk of being punished. The idea that Rob Harris of Sky or whomever is putting out there, CONCACAF are considering putting forward their plan as Montagliani as the potential next president of FIFA, that only happens if he feels like there's a power vacuum. Because the risk for the CONCACAF president, for the leak getting out there, oh, I'm thinking about taking your job. If it doesn't happen, or he ends up running an election and losing, he gets absolutely buried, and CONCACAF get buried in the process.
Right.
If you lose against him, it's a big risk. But he must feel, and they all must feel, the confederations and the presidents that are putting out this statement, they must feel that the direction of travel is that they will be fine going against Gianni, which has not been the case for 10 years now.
That's why whenever it is that Alejandro Dominguez and Patrice Motsepe say something, the Calciads go incredibly in the direction of Infantino not being president in the next cycle, because those are pillars. You still can rest your back on something if you're Infantino at this moment in Alejandro Dominguez, who's the president of a confederation that has offered basically half of the World Cup winners. There's football heritage, there is history there. With all due respect, it's not OFC. And CAF, with the amount of member associations and the power that they have, there's FIFA offices in the Moroccan Federation, in the home of where the World Cup will be hosted in the next cycle, right? So you do risk a lot. Alejandro, and this is going back to what we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago. That's why CONMEBOL and CAF have stayed so quiet, because the next massive moment is when they decide if they're in favor or against. My hunch tells me that these are such power-hungry men that have been in power for so long that they won't risk losing their status in the football world by going against Infantino. But if they do, I have a feeling that's game over.